I wanted to go over the sequence that I talked about last night because it's a very important one in order to understand the evolution of samsara. So, it starts out with ignorance. So this is the ignorance that grasps at inherent or true existence. And then following the ignorance, then we have distorted attention or inappropriate attention, or however you want to translate it. The Tibetan term is sulmaniche. And that is a mental factor or a mind, because minds and mental factors cannot be separated. If you have a mind, if you have a mental factor, it's going to be together with a primary mind. So this distorted attention exaggerates or projects qualities, good or bad qualities that aren't there on the object. It's the one that makes up the story, okay? And as we can look in our minds, we make up a lot of stories, okay? That person didn't look at me, I think they don't like me, yeah? So-and-so used that tone of voice, that means that they disrespect me. That person smiled at me, they must be wonderful and I want to become their friend, instantly, forever. So it distorts distorts the object, so that the way we're seeing the object, all of our conceptualization around it is completely, cattywampers, okay? And so this can also include what we call the four distorted conceptions, seeing things that are impure as pure, seeing things that are dukkha by nature as happiness, seeing things that are impermanent as permanent, okay? And the fourth one, seeing what lacks a self as having a self, actually is the ignorance that started the whole thing off. So you see, we have all this jumble of stuff going on in our mind. And then, based on this story, based on all these conceptions and weird ways of looking at things, then an affliction arises, okay? Such as jealousy or anger or irritation or annoyance or greed or arrogance or any number of them, they arise based on that, all right? And you can feel it. I mean, by this time, things are pretty big. And, we have that emotion, but then we usually don't just drop it, yeah, but we act out of the emotion, okay, or we continue to flame the emotion by ruminating on the story and going over the details of the story again. You know how that goes? Like the first time it was just the rough details. Now it's like, okay, this person looked at me this way, but 3 weeks ago, they also looked at me the same way. So I think that, they haven't liked me for a long time. And then yesterday, they said these words, and so now they're really beginning to attack me and they want to humiliate me and make me look bad. And then we keep on embellishing it. So this is more distorted attention. And that inflames the emotion even more, yeah? And that some point, sometimes when the emotion is small, sometimes when it's big, then we act and we say something, we do something, yeah? We plan something with our mind, how I'm going to get even with that person, or how I'm going to attract that person to me, or how I'm going to prevent that person from ever leaving me because I can't live without them, or, whatever our thing is, okay? And so we have actions of body, speech, and mind following. That creates the karma. If you're thinking about the 12 links, the ignorance was the first link. This creation of karma is the second link. Yeah. And then here, that karma refers particularly to karma that creates the cause of rebirth. Okay. And then the rest of the 12 links play out and we get reborn in samsara, where we still have our ignorance and our distorted attention and all of our, disturbing emotions, and the whole thing keeps rolling on. Okay? So, of course, the ultimate antidote is to realize emptiness, because that cuts the root, which is the self-grasping ignorance. But that's going to take us a while to do. So in the meantime, we have to learn antidotes that are easier for us to apply. And whereas the antidote of the wisdom realizing emptiness pacifies all of the afflictions, because it uproots the ignorance that feeds them. These other antidotes that we're now going to cultivate that are easier are affliction specific. Okay, so for example, when we have our mind is raging with attachment, we think of the downsides of attachment. We think of impermanence, how whatever we're attached to, we're going to separate from, and that as much, the more attachment we have, the more pain we're going to experience when that separation occurs. When we're irritated, when we're annoyed, when we're angry, when we're enraged, okay, then we meditate on loving kindness, okay? And we try and, look at the person from a completely different perspective, like you brought up last night, thinking of their good qualities. And as you also brought up last night, when you're trying to do this at the beginning, every time you think of a good quality, you remember 5 bad qualities. Okay? So it's like we have to really work at these antidotes. Yeah. It's like any kind of habit, Remember when you were learning to ride a bicycle, you had to start with a tricycle, and we even fell off the tricycle. Yeah? And then we had training wheels, and we fell off there. And then we finally got a bike, and we fell off the bike also. So, we finally mastered learning to ride a bike simply by practice and familiarity. Okay, so it's the same thing here when we're trying to train our mind and direct it, so that it has a better perspective and conceptual view of what's going on. It's going to take time. And so we do this in our daily meditation. Okay, don't wait for the time when your mind's out of control, because it's like, after you've come down with a cold, you don't take the medicine that prevents the cold. Okay, you take the medicine that prevents it beforehand. Okay, so it's the same kind of thing. The more practice we get in our daily meditation, then if something starts to come up, we can identify the affliction quickly, and then very quickly turn our mind to the antidote. Okay. Now, if you're not sure what the antidote is, this is why we study the Lamrim and the thought training teachings, because these teachings are the antidotes to the afflictions. Okay, so it's not that we study Lam Rim, or even we study the great classical treatises, to gather a whole lot of information, but then when we meditate on something else, and when affliction comes, we throw up our hands and say, I don't know what to do. And when we die, we likewise sit there and go, It's like everything we're learning, we need to think about, how does this correct my attitude? What is the right attitude? What is the wrong one? We need to be able to discern between, a correct perspective and an incorrect one, between a virtuous mind and a non-virtuous mind, And then when we can discern between these things, then when we say, oh, there's a non-virtuous mind, there's an incorrect perspective that lies behind it. What's the antidote to that? And then all of a sudden, you remember, well, not all of a sudden, but hopefully you will remember one of the thought training techniques you learned, one of the Lam Rim meditations you learned. You will think about it, and by thinking about it, balance your mind again. Now, if you have it so that you can take some space from the situation and go back to your room and really think about the antidote, that's really good. But sometimes it's happening right then and there, and so you need to be able to recall what your antidote is at the time it's happening. And of course, it's going to be more difficult to apply at that moment, which is why we have tried to have lots of practice behind us, because that makes it easier. Okay? And sometimes, we get half of an antidote and then our mind just starts ruminating again and goes off on a tangent. And then, we got to bring it back. And especially in the evening, when it's quiet, go over what happened in the day. Try and balance your mind, correct your perspectives, make them more realistic. Do some purification for the times that we blew it and, and said something or did something that we wish we hadn't said or done. And then the purification process, part of doing that is thinking, okay, next time this type of thing happens, then how can I think, or how can I behave? And so you practice that again in your meditation, okay? And so that's how we really begin to train our mind and shift the mind and direct the mind in the direction we want it to go in. Yeah. Otherwise, the mind is like, one of the kitties when it takes off and goes zoom, zoom, up the stairs and down the stairs. And, sometimes our mind is completely like that, isn't it? Yeah. So then we just, bring it back. Even the kitties can't sustain that kind of energy. Our mind can't either. So, gradually we bring it back. We look at the situation and, plan again for the future. By learning how to apply these individual antidotes that are specific for the afflictions, then we gain control over our mind. And then that makes it easier to generate serenity. It makes it easier to gain an understanding of emptiness. And then through repeatedly practicing serenity and insight into emptiness, then we can unify them and really begin to subdue the afflictions in a very strong way, up to and including eradicating them from the mind stream altogether. Okay, so eventually we go on to the antidote of the wisdom realizing emptiness.